The kids at my door were smiling, asking to come in, and that's when I realized they didn't have eyes at all. I wasn't doing anything strange that night. No party, no drinking, just another late evening at home, scrolling through my phone, half watching some show I didn't care about. It was already dark. My street was drowned in that heavy suburban silence where every little sound feels magnified. The knock came out of nowhere, not aggressive or desperate, just polite, slow. 3 rhythmic taps. I felt more annoyed than scared, thinking a neighbor needed a favor. I checked the time, then looked through the peephole. 2 kids stood there. A boy and a girl, maybe 10 years old, standing way too still. They weren't shivering despite the night air. The boy looked up, smiled, and asked if they could come inside. They didn't leave for good after that first night. Or rather, they left, but they returned. 2 nights later, I spotted them sitting on the curb right outside my driveway. They weren't playing or talking. They were just sitting perfectly still, facing my front door. My heart hammered against my ribs as I pulled the curtains shut, trying to convince myself they were just neighborhood kids being weird. But the stillness was too absolute. Felt deliberate. A few days later, the tapping returned. This time it wasn't at the front door. It was at the sliding glass door in the back. I froze in the kitchen, my breath hitching in my throat, refusing to turn on the lights. I just stood there in the dark, listening to that soft, rhythmic sound. Tap, tap, tap. When I finally gathered the courage to peek through the blinds, they were right there, not 5 feet away. The boy was leaning slightly forward, his forehead almost touching the glass. Their voices were calm through the pain, muffled but unnervingly clear. They said they needed to call their mother. They said they were lost. The girl tilted her head at a sharp, unnatural angle, watching me with a blank expression that made my skin crawl. I didn't answer. I just waited, my muscles locking up with a tension so thick it felt like I was suffocating in the silence. Then, as if they'd reached an unspoken agreement, they simply stepped back into the shadows and vanished. I tried to convince myself it was just a localized phenomenon, a weird prank. Kids can be cruel and strange, and maybe they found some high-end contacts online to mess with people. That had to be it. But the logic didn't stop the cold from settling into my bones. My house, which used to be my sanctuary, felt different. The air was thinner, harder to breathe. Sleep became a battlefield. I'd drift off for what felt like hours, only to jerk awake and find that only 10 minutes had passed. Or I'd stare at the ceiling for a few minutes, blink, and realize the sun was coming up. My perception of time was warping, stretching, and snapping like old elastic. I felt nauseous constantly, a low-grade sickness that sat right behind my navel. Every time I walked past a window, my muscles would lock up. I started keeping the lights on in every room, but that only made the shadows in the corners look deeper. I found myself checking the locks 4 times a night. I knew they were locked, but I had to feel the metal turn. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. It wasn't just stress. It was like my body was vibrating at a frequency it wasn't designed for. I'd find myself standing in the hallway, listening for a sound that wasn't there, or maybe it was just the house settling. But the silence wasn't empty anymore. It was heavy. It was expectant. I tried going to work, tried talking to people, but their voices sounded distant. I felt detached, a ghost moving through a world that didn't fit anymore. When I finally came back home, the dread was waiting for me at the door. I walked inside and locked it, but the feeling didn't stay outside. It was already in the hallway. It followed me into the bedroom, settling in the dark space right behind my head. I couldn't handle the uncertainty anymore. I started typing vague descriptions into search bars late at night. Kids knocking at night, children with black eyes, people asking to come inside. I expected to find nothing, or maybe some local news report about a prank. Instead, the screen filled with thread after thread of people recounting the exact same thing. The same polite knocking, The same strange request to use a phone or get a glass of water. The same chilling detail. Eyes as dark as oil, devoid of any white or pupil. There it was, the name that turned my blood to ice. The black-eyed children. The consistency was the most terrifying part. It didn't matter if the stories were from 10 years ago or last week. The phrases were identical. We won't hurt you. We need to come in. The patterns were unmistakable, and the warnings were even clearer. Every thread ended with a frantic plea to never, ever open the door. As I scrolled deeper into the archived forums, I realized that those who did open the door never posted a follow-up. The stories stopped there. This wasn't a legend. It was a recurring nightmare that had been hunting for years, and it always ended in a silence that felt final. The realization didn't hit me all at once. It seeped in through the cracks of my sleep deprivation. I used to think I was just unlucky, a random victim of a cosmic glitch. But as I sat in my darkened living room, staring at the deadbolt, I understood that there was nothing accidental about their presence. They didn't choose this house because it was on a quiet street. They chose it because of me. I've always been a person who values politeness. I'm the one who holds doors open, who apologizes when someone else bumps into me, who tries to see the best in people. That inherent desire to be helpful, that deep-seated social conditioning to not be rude, that was my vulnerability. They smelled it on me like blood in the water. My isolation wasn't a shield. It was an invitation. I'm the guy who lives alone, who keeps a predictable schedule, whose life is a series of quiet, lonely loops. To them, I wasn't a person. I was an open window. My life has narrowed down to a set of survival rituals. I no longer look at windows after 5 p.m. I've moved my bed away from the wall that faces the street. I keep the TV volume high to drown out the potential for a knock, yet I keep my ears strained for the slightest shift in the floorboards. Paranoia has become my baseline. I find myself analyzing every interaction I have, wondering if the person behind me is just a person or something waiting for an opening. The terror has lost its sharp edge. It's no longer a spike of adrenaline. It's a dull, constant weight, like a coat I can never take off. I've stopped looking for a way out or a way to fight back. You don't fight the weather. You just endure it. This is my life now. I live in the shadow of the knock, waiting for the day my politeness finally outweighs my fear. It happened on a Tuesday. I hadn't slept in 4 days, and my mind was a thick fog of exhaustion and static. When the knock finally came, it didn't trigger the usual surge of adrenaline. I was just tired. So incredibly tired of the hiding, the hypervigilance, and the suffocating silence. I walked toward the entryway like a sleepwalker, my hand moving with a mind of its own. I didn't look through the peephole. I didn't check the monitors. I simply reached out and turned the deadbolt. The metallic click echoed through the hollow house, sounding like a gunshot. As the door swung open, the cold night air rushed in, and there they stood. The boy was smiling, his abyssal eyes locked onto mine. I realized in that heartbeat that I hadn't opened the door because I'd forgotten the rules. I opened it because I wanted the waiting to end. The terror didn't vanish. It just settled into a calm, heavy weight. I stepped back, making room. I didn't scream. I just watched them cross the threshold. Time doesn't move in straight lines anymore. I find myself standing in the kitchen for hours, watching the shadows stretch across the floor, and when I blink, the sun is in a different corner of the sky. They don't make noise. They just exist in the periphery of my vision, two small shapes that always seem to be standing just behind the nearest doorway. The sharp, jagged fear has eroded into a flat, gray familiarity. It's like living with a low-frequency hum that you eventually stop hearing, even though it's vibrating your teeth. I don't try to leave anymore. I don't think I can. The most unsettling part isn't what they might do to me, but the realization that I'm starting to understand their silence. I'm starting to feel the same hunger they do. I look at the door now and I don't feel afraid of who might knock. I feel sorry for them.